Typically, we record this podcast on a Thursday, and this week, because of all the weird stuff, we decided to push things back one day, and I'm grateful we did. I will say that does not mean we're out of the woods, because things are going to change likely during the show for today after we record. 13 seconds after we press done, things are going to change. But I'm glad we're talking here on a Friday as opposed to Thursday, because week 15 is going to be a very weird and difficult slate. That's not a bad thing, because we can still win money on difficult slates, but there's a lot to dissect here. We want to make sure we go through everything, identify key changes, and let you know what to do on FanDuel.com for this week. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor of numberFire.com. And Brandon, week 15 is weird. How are you doing today?
Yeah. You said we're not out of the woods yet. We're very much in Fangorn Forest right now, where the trees are going to come get you. That it feels like.
Are we talking like Wizard of Oz type of thing here?
But don't do that to me. You know what this is.
Wizard of Oz,
bud.
You don't like any other IP me, that includes moving trees, right?
You're killing me. But yeah, I mean, they helped win the Battle of Helm's Deep. But anyway, we're
I think there's a guy who follows me on Twitter. His last name is Helms. So Josh, I think it's Josh. I hope if you were involved in this tree battle, I hope it went okay for you.
So it honestly just feels like we're trying to navigate, and then as soon as we find out one piece of information, we get other pieces of information. Obviously, the COVID list is a huge factor, but we still have like traditional injuries to try to figure out. I honestly, by Friday, historically we have done the main. We have this show done.
Yeah.
And by Friday, things are even more formed in my head. I'm like, okay, I talked out the slate with Jim the day before. I'm really starting to whittle things down even more. I feel like this week I'm somehow like, I'm not even sure what the matchups are, because I've been so focused on trying to make adjustments in my head of like, who should I like, from a workload standpoint before I even really get to the matchup. So you're probably going to like mention some guy, like somebody, and I'm going to be like, who are they playing?
I will say,
we also have the added
like,
wrinkle of Saturday games, which is throwing me off too.
Yeah, the Saturday games are kind of weird too. I think the matchup portion of it is also pertinent this week, because I think we're going to have to change our process for this week a bit, because typically, if you're a longtime listener, we revolve around game stacks, identifying games with, for the most part, high totals, tight spreads, where we want action on both sides. We can see things potentially shooting out. I think this week is a week where I will be tweaking that pretty significantly and relying more on single team stacks, having Kyler Murray with Christian Kirk and then no bring back on the Detroit side, stuff like that. So it's an alteration of the process. I think that is fine, because we have to be malleable. We have to adjust. Our opponents have to adjust too, so we can still win cash. And it's a tough slate, but tough slates reward people who pay attention, who work hard to try to identify news. We're going to try to help. Stuff will change, but hopefully we can at least put you on the right path here. Quick update here for you. Once again, as always, do have the Listener League back once again for this week. To get yourself entered, go to FanDuel.com/league/Listener League, FanDuel.com/league/Listener League to get yourself entered. $5 entry, 3 entries max. There is no rake. I know Robert, I think it was last week, won and tweeted at us, let us know that he won. Robert, congrats. Run it back this week. Also rooting for all of you. Every single one of you. We are rooting for you in this Listener League. FanDuel.com/league/Listener League. $5 entry, 3 entries max. No rake. Fun contest structure for you there. Also, what better way to gear up for the weekend than to spice up your thirsty Thursday night football with FanDuel and Captain Morgan? Next week, the final Thursday night game of the year. So check out Captain Morgan's Thursday Night Pick'em, a completely free-to-play contest series that gives you 4 chances to win a share of $10,000. Here's how it works. FanDuel fans will enter with the chance to answer 10 questions centered around both Captain Morgan and that Thursday's NFL matchup. Fans who answer the most questions correctly will be eligible to earn their share of that week's $10,000 cash prize. Thursday Night Football coming up once again next week. So head to FanDuel.com/Captain Morgan NFL and spice up your game day today. I believe those contests go up on Tuesday. So Tuesday, CaptainMorgan.com, FanDuel.com/Captain Morgan NFL. Must be 21 plus to participate. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Eligibility restrictions apply. And don't forget to spice up your game day with Captain Morgan. Let's take a quick look at the slate overview here for this week. And I think that you talked about it before, Brandon, where it's a slate where we need to focus primarily on volume and grind into volume first and then add in additional elements. And that is going to definitely skew things and change our process. But to me, that's the key takeaway this week is identifying who will be getting volume, identifying if that volume will lead to points, and deciding how that relates to things here. And I think being a bit picky with everything. I think that this week, specifically with value plays, I can be picky because I've actually got some that I like. So I think that's the key thing for me. What about for you?
You do have value plays you like?
Yeah. What do you mean?
Very, very few. I mean, not to the point where I'm nitpicking them. I'm just lucky to have them. So maybe
we got James Robinson. I like Davonte Freeman a pretty decent amount. I think that works pretty well. I would use Zeke if there were no Pollard. I would use Michelle if there were no Henderson. I'm okay with Antonio Gibson. All those guys are below 7,000. Cordell Patterson is exactly 7,000. I'm okay with him. We got Devontae Parker. We have Van Jefferson. We have Gabriel Davis. We have Zach Ertz. I think there's a lot of value on this slate, so I can be picky. It's great. I don't need to chase Freddie Swain or D. Eskridge if they play. I can be picky.
I think for me, the 5 running backs you named are just the 5 running backs that we play this week. So
potentially,
it's not really. Yeah.
Unless we get AJ Dillon with no Aaron Jones.
But yeah, I know we got a trend on the Titans, so we're not really gonna chase Najee or anything like that. But I think that one of the overviews for me is, in this house on this podcast, we pay up to roster stud running backs. We do not have them this week. We just don't. And so that alters everything. That also means that, yes, we have 5 or 6 viable, 7,000 and lower running backs, but is Devonte Freeman going to be a better flex play than like a Christian Kirk at a similar salary?
Yeah.
I think this week I'm much more open to flexing a receiver, or in a very specific case, if I play Zach Ertz, I'll just flex George Kittle sometimes because I just view him as a receiver. But I don't think it's necessarily a week where I play 3 running backs in every lineup. Even though I'm still more inclined to do that, I don't feel like it's an automatic just I'm playing 3. Who are my 3 running backs for my main lineup?
Right.
I'm not necessarily locked into that.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that looking at this slate, because there are fewer priorities, because the scoring gap between the acceptable running backs and the acceptable receivers is not as big. And honestly, there are a lot of receivers I want to use. Like you talked about Devontae Freeman versus, was it Van or Kirk? It was Kirk. I think you can go through the same thought process with Cordero Patterson versus Deante Johnson. And I'd probably prefer Deante there. So I think that it's worth pointing out. I know a lot of people are more willing to use receivers in the flex than we are, but I think it's worth noting that we are open to it this week, which means that if your baseline is, 50-50, you might want it to be just all in on receivers in the flex or tight ends. I think that also does work for those 2 specifically, Ertz and Kittle, I think.
Yeah. I could see myself going to, depending on how salary breaks, if I have George Kittle and I play and I have enough salary to get to Mike Gesicki, I could kind of see that, but
Dawson Knox, I think, is somewhat in that consideration too.
Yeah, it's honestly, so I think just one of the running themes for us is thinking about the slate a little bit more differently. And if we're doing that, most people probably are too. It's just again, that baseline's probably a bit different. But yeah, not having game stacks though, the reason we like game stacks is correlation. And I've done the research, and even slight boost in percentage odds over a 9-player, including defense, lineup, that helps your probability of a good lineup by a lot. If you lose those correlations, it's a little bit less likely, but I don't think that it's worth it to force it for teams that just have nothing to bring it back with.
It's always hard to hit an 8-player parlay, which is effectively what a FanDuel lineup is. It is a lot easier when the legs of the parlay are correlated, which is why same game parlays can be fun. Obviously, those are like they account for the correlation, but that's effectively what we're saying here. We might not get that this week. I think that there are still some spots to have at least like mini stacks, but it's very different composition than usual. And I think that is worth noting for sure. Okay, let's take a look at, one thing I would say though with the flex stuff, if we were to get Michelle with no Henderson, if we get Zeke with no Pollard, if we get Chase Edmonds with no James Conner, if we get all those situations to break, that changes things. So that's what I would say there. As far as
that, but even, two of those guys with a Freeman, James Robinson, like I'm not saying like I'm not going to play 3 running backs, but it's, it's a week.
We're just less firm on it than usual. Yeah, for sure. Okay, shifting to the injuries and starting off with a non-injury. That is Urban Meyer getting the can overnight on Wednesday. They've had some weird stuff around him. They get the Texans this week. Carlos Hyde also in concussion protocol. I think, for me, that's the bigger note here, is like Carlos Hyde is in concussion protocol than Urban Meyer getting fired. So with those two things in mind, any alterations for you to the Jags for this week?
Well, that's not a fun take to have, that the opportunity. You should be saying you're more
Urban
excited.
Meyer's gone. James Robinson will get 70 touches now. Lock him into your lineup. It can't fail. There you go. Gotcha.
Usually I underreact to a lot of this stuff because, you take out, in a more traditional sense, where a coach loses his job midseason, it's the team's been performing poorly. Then they got to, promote someone who, at least ostensibly wasn't a head coach for a reason to that point. And that's usually how I view it. I'm like, it's probably a wash at best. This one, though, so specifically might matter because the team really, really did not like Urban Meyer. So I do think it's a little bit of a bump. Obviously, we are centered in data. We don't fall into like we joke about a lot of narratives, like, the homecoming narratives, the birthday narratives, but like, I think this might actually matter a little bit more. And I wouldn't say I'm going to play James Robinson if we had Carlos Hyde. I'm not saying I'm going to stack Trevor Lawrence with anybody. I'm just saying it helps me get much more in on James Robinson in an offense that's pretty bad.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think that with in the 2 games Hyde has missed, Robinson's snap rates are 85% and 95%.
Begrudgingly, I'm sure.
Yeah, but like, he couldn't use Carlos Hyde. And I think the thing that helps here is that it's not like some rando stepping in. Like Darrell Bevell was the interim coach for the Lions all of last year, or for half of last year, and like he did a good job. He's a smart offensive coordinator, despite what Urban Meyer wants to believe. And I think that gives me more confidence here as well. It doesn't like make me super eager to get to like anyone else. But I think when you add in the Hyde injury with everything else, it makes Robinson a really good play at 63. The problem is I know everyone else thinks that too. So the question is, do you pivot to Marvin Jones as a way to get off of James Robinson, or do you just accept Robinson and accept that value at a slate at a position that's not overly deep? To me, I think that like in my non-Robinson lineups, I do want to look at Marvin Jones. I think that there is some appeal in that, but default is just I'm going to take the under-salaried volume and go with that.
I think my main issue is that I view this as a net positive and an actual reason for change, but Trevor Lawrence in the underlying data hasn't been very good, and I don't know how much of that will change, within a few days, just because he doesn't have Urban Meyer there. Like he's one of the worst downfield passers in football. I know that the receivers
his results are the worst.
Sure, yeah.
It's hard when you're throwing to Laquan Treadwell, Tavon Austin, Laviska Shenault.
Well, I don't know if Laviska's ever been targeted downfield.
That's true.
So I'm not saying, I'm sitting here saying it's a positive. It helps me on James Robinson. I will consider Marvin Jones if he makes lineups really work, but I'm not saying like, I'm stacking this whole offense for the revenge.
Yeah, it's mostly Robinson here for me. The Rams have a COVID outbreak with Odell Beckham hitting the list on Tuesday. Jalen Ramsey and Darrell Henderson tested positive earlier on. They have not been cleared to return yet. Meanwhile, the Seahawks placed Tyler Lockett and Alex Collins on the COVID list yesterday. Fun times, really great. We'll talk about this game in the bookmaker section. DeAndre Hopkins is going to miss the rest of the regular season due to a knee injury, and then James Conner hasn't practiced yet this week. Chase Edmonds expected back from IR. We'll talk about the Cardinals against the Lions in the bookmakers section as well. Lamar Jackson missed another practice on Thursday. That puts his status up in the air against the Packers. Tyler Huntley would start if Lamar were to sit. So where would you be on the Ravens if we assume that Huntley starts, and how does this alter your view of the Packers offense?
I'm doing a trend on this. Should I save it or say it now?
Yeah, we'll save it. I didn't look. Ahead.
No,
Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard got in a limited practice on Thursday after not practicing Wednesday. That is a step in the right direction for him. Tyron Smith has been ruled out. They talked about that on the radio show on Monday. That's a bummer. We'll talk more about that in the trend section, but shed a tear for our boy Tyron Smith. Eli Mitchell was listed as a non-participant on Thursday. Probably did some side work, but he's not going to play. We'll talk more about this backfield in the bookmaker section. J.D. McKissick did not practice Thursday as he is still in concussion protocol. And surprise, surprise, Taylor Heineke just tested positive for COVID. So they're going to start. Let me see here. Garrett Gilbert, Kyle Shermer, or Jordan Ta'amu. Shout out XFL.
Yeah.
Wasn't he like DK Metcalf's quarterback in college? I think he might have been DK Metcalf and AJ Brown's quarterback in college.
I think so. Yeah.
So that's not ideal. Oh boy. Terry McLaurin missed practice Wednesday. He was upgraded to limited on Thursday. So Kyle Allen likely out. Taylor Heineke, I feel pretty firm in saying is out. I'm guessing, I don't know about his vaccination status. Anyway, bad situation for Washington. Does that make you avoid Antonio Gibson in this situation with how much poo they've had hit the wall?
So, I mean, this makes me... So workload matters at running back, but so does offensive expectations. I think I'd have to put Jacksonville against Houston above this offense now. So it's going to be hard for me to justify Antonio Gibson at 6,900 when I can play James Robinson at 63. That's not to say I wouldn't touch Antonio Gibson, but I really don't think that I would get there.
It's a really big downgrade. They are starting their fifth string center, who is apparently a plus size model. So shout out, big boys. Love it. That's rough. It sounds like Kyle Shermer will start. I think he's Pat Shermer's kid. Didn't he go to like Vanderbilt? I don't know. Anyway, I shouldn't have to like Google the starting quarterback. So I was going to look up his college stats, and because my brain is broken, I searched Kyle Shermer Racing Reference, which is like the sports reference page for NASCAR and Formula One. Happy December, everybody. Kyle Shermer Sports Reference. Did go to Vandy. Got that. 8.2 AYA in his final year, which was 2018. He is not mobile.
No.
That's actually not terrible stats for a Vanderbilt quarterback, given the level of competition. But typically third. You said this with coaches. Typically, third stringers are third stringers for a reason. I think you can probably avoid Gibson. I mean, I think there's still a path to him being fine, but that path, the probability of that path hitting just took a major hit.
Yeah, especially with what we're about to talk about next, with Jalen Hurts likely out. Game, Gardner Minshew is fine. I don't want to jump ahead, but trying to adjust for context of this game, Gardner Minshew might be able to move the ball against this defense. And
their whole defense is on the COVID list, so probably. Let's talk about that. Miles Sanders, Jalen Hurts, Jordan Howard, all limited at practice this week. In week 13 with no Hurts, Gardner Minshew was, pretty good against the Jets. Problem is they were still a very run-heavy team. Their early down first half pass rate is 45%. So he had 11 first half attempts. He was crazy efficient in those, which is good. But they don't really change. But let's talk about this Eagles team. I think it's 50-50 if Hurts plays. I think it's almost a lock that Sanders and Howard plays. If that winds up being true, how are you viewing this team?
If we get Howard and Sanders, I can't play either of them. I don't like how they split up the work. We could see Miles Sanders play 70% of the snaps between the 20s, and then they just hand it off to Jordan Howard at the goal line. Even in a run-heavy offense, that's not really enough for me. I mean, I guess I'd consider Devontae Smith at 59, but they're so run-heavy that he's got to cash in on like the 4 targets he'd get. Yeah. So I'm probably out here. What's Dallas Goedert's salary? 6,000. That's too high for me.
Yeah, I mean, like, so at tight end, we love Kittle. We love Zach Ertz. I think Knox and Gesicki are both very in play. I'd rank all those guys above Goddard, and I'm not even sure I'll use Gesicki and Knox because I think I could justify just using Ertz and Kittle in every lineup this week. So although Goddard is fine, I am okay with not being super enthusiastic there. If Hurts plays, would you use him or no?
Would I use Jalen Hurts?
Yeah.
Probably not.
I agree. Emmanuel Sanders seems likely to sit this week due to his knee injury. We saw Gabriel Davis pop up in week 14 with a bunch of red zone work and routes. Are you considering Gabriel Davis at $4,900?
The question is, do I have to? Like, I think that's really what it comes down to. I think the only reason I would need to go down to Gabriel Davis is if I'm playing either Kyler or Josh Allen, which, spoiler alert, I might play just those 2 quarterbacks in every lineup anyway. Got a jam in Cooper Kupp and George Kittle. And I don't really want to like load up on a Davonte Freeman, James Robinson combo. I don't know how often I'm going to do that. As much as I like Gabriel Davis, I still have, I don't really envision that he'll be a high volume receiver. He'll have high leverage on his volume, but I'm probably not going to, like, he's a rotational piece, but he's not someone I would put in my loves.
Yeah, I think so. If we're talking like exposure levels, probably like 15 to 20.
15.
Yeah, like if he helps me increase my exposure to Cooper Kupp, like if you use Gabriel Davis, having a Kyler Kupp Kittle, which is fun to say, a Murray Kupp Kittle lineup is very easy to get to, and I'd like to do that. So I think that's kind of the main appeal of him, is it allows me to get the actual studs I do like, which is mostly those 3. I think there's a strong case for some other receivers too, but I don't need to go there very often because there are some other lower salaried receivers with more volume who I do like, but I think that I'd use them to get more access to those studs for sure.
It's just like on a more typical slate when we had like Jonathan Taylor or Alvin Kamara or Austin Eckler, and we wanted to get to Kyler or Josh Allen, like, yeah, I'd be like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to take what he gives me down there because he does have that path to 85 and or a touchdown. Within this slate, I don't need it as much. And so I don't want to get too overconfident in his role.
Yeah.
When I'm already making assumptions in other places a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so the Dolphins plays Jalen Waddle on the COVID list on Thursday. They also currently have no running backs because they're all on the COVID list. I think there's a pretty good chance that Myles Gaskin gets activated. Savon Ahmed potentially could too, based on the timing of when they tested positive, but not a certainty right now. So I'm honestly I'm not going to analyze the Dolphins backfield. I trust all of you to figure that out yourself once we know who will play. Let's talk about the pass catchers, though, because Waddle very likely out. What does that do for your interest level on Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki?
Yeah, it's up for sure. The volume should be there. The volume was there for Gesicki in week 13 before their bye. He had 11 targets. Devontae Parker just the 5, which was actually 3 fewer than Albert Wilson. But I don't expect that to like stick around. So I think I can't really view Gabriel Davis without the context of assuming I have Devontae Parker, Christian Kirk. Yes, these guys are 1,000 plus more in salary, but the gap with their role, their, I think, solidified volume,
yeah,
compared to his is really hard for me to take that leap with Davis.
Yeah. Parker's 58. Like he's not that much higher than Davis. And
Yeah,
like,
it's 1,000
yeah.
plus, but like, or
But the gap
almost.
between James Robinson and the guys in the low 7,000 range is minimal. I think the gap here is probably
Yeah.
larger. I think that Parker would have been a good play even if Waddle had played. Now you take him out. And like, sure, you lower expectations for Tua Tagovailoa, but like against the Jets, it's not enough where I care about it for Parker or for Gesicki. I think it's more so just like, hey, they get a volume bump, really good matchup. I think we just use those two guys and feel good about it.
Yeah, I would have considered Tua because,
Correct.
again, like I've said this outright already, but like we have Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, and then it's a big drop to a
Shrug
pretty
emoji.
flat tier with a lot of guys with question marks. So I would have considered Tua. I don't think I'll quite get there without Jalen Waddle, but
my thoughts exactly. I agree. Other side of that game, Michael Carter designated to return for the Jets. Tevin Coleman also back at practice. The Jets suck though. Facing the Dolphins, any interest in Carter or anybody else on this team?
No.
Perfect. Let's move on to the bookmaker info for this week. Still a decent setup for Rams Seahawks despite all the COVID positive. It is a 44.5 point total. The Rams favor by 5.5 now. As of this recording, Darrell Henderson, Odell Beckham, Tyler Lockett, Alex Collins, Jalen Ramsey all on the COVID list. Henderson likely the one with the best odds to be activated because he tested positive first. But with how things currently set up, is this a game you will stack?
Sorry, every time I see a notification, I'm like, who else is out now? I'm like
just
jumping
Hyde now. Hyde's officially out.
Yeah, so I'm just jumping all over the place because I'm like, who? So Rams Seahawks, a game that I'll stack. The only Seahawk I would even consider playing would be DK Metcalf. I think I'm over Gerald Everett with tight end looking how it does. So it's really hard to say. I'm going to stack this one up.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm going to play a lot of Cooper Kupp. And I don't know if that means I'll get to Matthew Stafford at 77. He might be the QB 4 for me. 3, 4.
So Murray, Allen, and then what?
It's Murray, Allen way up. Like they're in their own stratosphere.
Like Rodgers next or what?
I have Dak.
Okay. With Tyron Smith out, I'd go Stafford over Dak.
But it's, I could see myself playing Stafford with Kupp. And if one question I had, I was saving it for this section is your thoughts on Sony Michel, even if Darrell Henderson were to play, because I kind of don't care anymore. I feel like Sony's the guy.
I think he would be available as a tournament option with so I would say 25-ish%. And to me, that's a low number. I tend to be very concentrated at running back. So 25% sounds like a lot, but it's not for me. That's more when I say 25%, that is what I would deem to be a rotational piece versus a core play.
Yeah.
If there's no Henderson, is he the best running back on the slate?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty easily.
So he goes from being the best running back on the slate to being a tournament option to whom I would want exposure. Okay.
So I think we're roughly on the same page. Would you say that this is a game you'll stack?
So yes, It's indoors, decently tight spread. It is a repeat divisional matchup, but I can't really be that picky this week.
But then I got to ask, who are you playing from Seattle?
DK. It's just DK.
Okay. So but yeah, again, we're on the same page. I just kind of say it's not really a game I'm stacking. I'm
stacking it in terms of I will have 3 Rams and DK. I think that Stafford, Kupp, Sony, but also Stafford, Kupp, Van. I never use 2 receivers on the same team because they cannibalize each other so much on FanDuel specifically, where touchdowns matter a lot. And if Van scores, Cooper Kupp's not scoring. Very rarely do you see 2 receivers from the same team in a perfect lineup. This week, I actually do think it's actually kind of fun. So when I say stack it, that typically means a 3-1 with 3 Rams, 1 Seahawk, specifically being DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I think anytime there's only one viable bring back, I would just sort of semantically say it's not a stack. But like, again, we're on the same page here, just
Yeah.
kind of saying it differently. But it's definitely, the most likely game, I think, to pop off.
I think so too.
So
where I think both sides are most in play. I think so. I was working on player picks on Wednesday and initially had Russell Wilson in there. I took him out once the Lockett news hit because I think that is a significant downgrade. And
yes.
Honestly, it does lower my interest in DK Metcalf a hair, like as a standalone play, because I think the odds that this offense is just dysfunctional are higher. That's another reason why I'm not going to chase Swaim or Eskridge, because they also both didn't practice on Wednesday, Thursday. So like, it's not like they're fully healthy right now either. So it really is Metcalf. You could make a case for Rashad Penny, but his role is it's not very fantasy friendly because of the lack of passing game work. There are now greater odds they fall behind. Adrian Peterson likely going to play this week. So personally, I'm okay just being out on Rashad Penny. That might be contrarian. I actually don't know. I haven't gotten a good feel for what people will do with him this week, but where are you at on Rashad Penny?
So he played 58% of the snaps last week. He had 2 red zone carries, 2 of 3, 40% of the routes, which was just 11. Again, he had the phenomenal run, like long rushes. He was about 65 yards over expectation, which, I mean, that's kind of what happens whenever but his success rate wasn't particularly good. That's a little bit worrisome. I think that he'll probably just be somebody who's more popular than he deserves to be because of the results from last week. But we're still looking at someone who played sub 60% snap rate and who doesn't project to have a whole lot of passing volume in a low volume passing offense. Even if he's running routes, they're going to throw the ball elsewhere. And just going back to DK Metcalf here, it's been 10 games since he's had more than 8 targets. He's had 8 targets in a lot of those, exactly 8 targets, but no games in the past 10 with more than 8 targets and none with at least 100 yards. He has a 100-yard game this year. Like, I know Russ has been hurt and like that's part of it, but he himself has not converted on a lot of opportunities, which is really, really worrisome because he's not 100% either.
Right. With Penny, the ground game has been bad all year. I don't want to change my expectations on that because they tore up Houston, especially against the Rams. I know the Rams have some guys out, but still it's tougher than Houston, especially on the road.
Okay, where would you rank him?
DK?
6,100.
Oh,
no,
sorry. Penny. Okay.
Yeah, I know I took it to DK. But I'm trying to stay on Penny now. I just wanted to throw that out there. Where do you rank him among? Let's keep it even at. Let's make it fair. Let's say James Robinson, Rashad Penny, Davonte Freeman, all extremely similar salaries.
He's the lowest of those 3
by far, because I think he is for me.
Not by far, because if I assume Huntley plays, that does lower Davonte, and I am assuming he'll play. But I would say it's Robinson, clear 1, Davonte 2, Rashad Penny 3, and I don't really have like any like trepidation ranking it that way. I feel pretty firm in that personally.
Me too. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Highest total on the slate is in Detroit. Or the Lions and the Cardinals. That's mostly because of the Cardinals. They're 12.5-point favorites. That gives them the highest implied total of the week. They will be without DeAndre Hopkins. James Conner did not practice Wednesday or Thursday. T.J. Hawkinson done for the year. DeAndre Swift missed practice on Wednesday and Thursday, so he's probably going to sit too. So what is your favorite way to get exposure to the Cardinals, and are you bringing it back with any Lions here?
Okay, favorite way is just Kyler because he
Naked?
is in. What's that?
Naked?
No,
Naked
I'm just saying
Kyler?
like my absolute favorite aspect of this game is to get access to Kyler Murray.
Uh-huh.
I will stack him with Christian Kirk. I will stack him with Zach Ertz. I will also stack him with AJ Green.
Uh-huh.
But Kyler is in a great position to put up a huge game, and we don't need salary for running backs. I don't want to get cute and like talk myself into Russell Wilson without Tyler Lockett. As much as I'm going to talk about Dak Prescott, I don't really think that it's even comparable, like same planet. And if you look at we have 14 weeks in the books now. We have 14 main slate optimal lineups. 11 of those 14 quarterbacks in the main slate optimal lineups have had a salary of 7,700 or higher. I know that you have to adjust that for everything, but like we see big games from quarterbacks, and whenever we have big games from quarterbacks at the top of the salary pool, you still need them. And so I'm really letting that apply to me for this week with Kyler and Josh Allen. So my favorite way is to make sure I have a ton of Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
How I stack him will depend, but my favorite default is probably going to be Christian Kirk or Zach Ertz. As far as bringbacks go, like, I don't know. You know, I'm an Amon-Ra St. Brown fan, but I don't think I'm going to quite get there.
Yeah.
In this spot.
I think Kyler is the best quarterback on the slate, even without DeAndre. So like we talked about Russ getting downgraded with no Lockett. The depth here is very, 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 very different. AJ Green is better than the Eskridge right now. So like the drop off is significantly different. So that's why I think Kyler is the best quarterback on the slate. I will be using him in our head to head versus each other. Yes. Just let you know, just full transparency there.
Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, I know. Really divulging state secrets here. And I do think that Chase Edmonds is very interesting if Connor can't go. Like, because the primary concern is Edmonds losing work at the goal line to James Conner. And if that's not the case, Connor practiced last week, which I think is a key thing. Whenever a guy practiced for 2 weeks before coming off IR, my level of enthusiasm.
Oh, you meant Edmonds. You said Connor.
Yeah, sorry, Edmonds. You're right. Yeah, thank you. My level of enthusiasm / confidence in playing them is much, much, much higher. So I would say that like Kyler core play, Ertz core play, Edmonds would be a core play then if that were to happen. I think Connor probably still plays, but he'd be a core play then. And then I'd rank them in that order and then get to Kirk and Green after that.
Okay. I mean, I love Christian Kirk in this spot. He should be the primary beneficiary of the downfield work. I have some notes later on how bad Detroit is against the downfield pass. But 2 questions probably quickly because we've spent a lot of time on this one. If James Conner plays, but so does Edmonds, are you going to play James Conner at 8,000?
Nope.
Jim shaking his head no.
They said already they were going to lower his volume, so I'll miss out. It's fine.
Any Detroit bringbacks?
I will have, so because I'll have so many Kyler lineups, I think it'll be worth having a mixture of Josh Reynolds and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Okay.
Probably prefer Reynolds because I think that like realistically his rostering will be like 0.5%. And I think with his downfield role, he has an easier path to like actually me benefiting from using him. So I would say Reynolds be the one, but like he and Amon-Ra St. Brown are 1A, 1B. But I think in my Kyler lineups, if you give me 10 Kyler lineups, I'm probably running it back in 4 to 5. Yeah, probably. I think half is as high as I'd go.
Yeah, that's probably about it for me. Also, Amon-Ra St. Brown in his FanDuel player photo, he's like cut off at like just under his mouth, so he looks real low.
Did they just like not move the camera?
Well, I think it's apropos for his ADOT.
Short. Yeah. New Danny Amendola. Okay, second highest implied total on the slate belongs to the 49ers. They are hosting the Falcons. 46-point total with the 49ers favored by 9.5. Eli Mitchell did not practice Thursday. George Kittle returned to practice Thursday. So same question as the last one. What is your favorite route for exposure to the 49ers and any interest in a bring back on the Falcons side?
Favorite for the 49ers is just George Kittle. Bring backs with the Falcons, Cordero.
Anything else or just Cordero?
Nothing else for me, I don't think, with Atlanta. I love Brandon Ayuk, but my absolute favorite is George Kittle. Similar vibe with him at tight end relative to other tight ends as we have with quarterback with Kyler and Josh Allen over the rest of the quarterbacks. If he goes nuts, nobody else really can go nuts aside from Mark Andrews. And as far as the Falcons go, I don't like the offense enough, aside from Cordero, whose role I still don't love because the snap rate's low, but they just basically inject him into the high leverage situations, so it's not really a true snap rate.
It's interesting because I feel like he is very similar to Debo, where both of their roles have changed recently, but they're still getting work that can pay off. So for Cordero, I think the most relevant sample for him is the past 3 games where they've been using him more as like an early down type guy. In those 3 games, he's at 96.7 yards from scrimmage per game. That's actually still a very good number relative to this slate, at least. Like if it's Jonathan Taylor, it's not, but it's not. He has a 48% red zone share. That is actually second best on this slate among anyone, behind Antonio Gibson in each guy's most relevant sample. And also, like, they're not gonna, I mean, Gibson's not gonna behind the red zone with whoever is, I don't know. So I would say that works out pretty well. I like Patterson still. I know there was a blurb on NBC Sports Edge today about how they're like managing his touches. They're kind of in the playoff hunt, which is weird.
They've been managing his touches. Like he's not been a high volume guy where they need to like limit him. He just like comes in and near the red zone and gets like high leverage work. So I don't know what kind of workload they're managing.
Yeah. So like, I still think he's a good play personally. I would like to be overweight on him, and I'm guessing I will just based on sentiment I have seen and looking at some. I'm on the wrong. What? Sorry, I was scrolling down and saw Van Jefferson as a running back, and I got very confused. But that's because I can't read. Okay, I found him. I don't think Cordero will be very popular, and I think that the blurbs about his workload will probably keep said popularity in check. So to me, I think he's a pretty solid play. And one I'm very inclined to use, I think he's kind of like the one bring back. And I think it's similar to Detroit where I'm not going to bring it back every time. But I would say it's closer to like 2/3 of lineups I'll have a bring back. Most likely Cordero. I might sprinkle in Pitts, but probably not. I don't know. It's probably just Cordero. As far as Debo goes, so we have a 4-game sample on them using him as a running back. In those 4 games, can you guess yardage totals on average for Ayuk, Kittle, and Debo?
For each of them?
Yeah.
Bro, I don't do yardage numbers off the top of my head, but for Kittle, he's got like 2 huge games. I'll just say 100.
Well, no, Debo didn't play in one of those. So that game, week 13 does not count because Debo didn't play.
This is a very complex on the fly question.
It's week 10, 11, 12, 14. Give me a number between 0 and 1,000
for all
yardage total. Yeah.
I think you said on Monday Debo is at like 90, 91.
Good job. Yes.
Ayuk 85.
68.
Okay. I knew he was putting up a ton of yards. He's getting a lot of red zone work though. Kittle like $115.
62.
Okay.
He had 3 really bad games. It's a 4-game sample. So like
last week, I'm still bogged down by the recency bias of Kittle's. More massive
last
games.
week it was great. And he played with Debo. So like that was a very good one. But like the first 3 games, he was at 50 or lower. Ayuk, so Debo's average is 91 yards in this span. That is Ayuk's max this year is 91 yards in scrimmage.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't. Okay, so then if I'm reading this right, it was at Cincinnati versus the Vikings, at the Jaguars, and versus the Rams.
Was that week 10?
I don't know. I just have George Kittle's game log up, and if you said 50 or fewer, I'm not that concerned. He scored.
Oh no, I'm not concerned about him. I'm saying Debo is still in play. That was the point of that.
Oh,
like 62 yards for a tight end is still fine. With upside for 150, sure, I'll take it. Yeah.
Okay.
The point was not to downplay Kittle. It was more to say I think Debo is someone we should include in game stacks.
Sure. I mean, we're also looking at a game against the Falcons, so
true. Like, where are you at on Debo at a very high salary. I think he's oversalaried, but I think that the upside is still there, which is why I want to use him. Will you not use him at all?
No. Well, okay. I mean, to be, again, fully transparent, I've been scaling back my lineup count. So I don't play hundreds of lineups.
Just playing different contests, basically.
Yeah. If I'm building 10 lineups, probably not enough to get there.
Yeah.
If I'm building 50, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because with 10 lineups, you really need a tight core, especially this week. This is a week where I'm risking looking at running back on Sunday morning and saying, guess I got to have a few shares of this guy and this guy because I don't feel great about certain options. We could get news that makes me feel like I can just lock in Zeke or Sony or whatever. Mm-hmm. But without that, kind of as it is now with some uncertainty, it's hard to sit here and say, like I'm just trying to remind myself not to get sprinkles of everybody.
Yeah.
Even on a week like this.
So one thing I find very interesting here is that early roster rate projections do have a lot of Debo, and I don't know why. It's kind of weird.
He's always popular.
Yeah, so he is, but like trying to gauge sentiment on shows and Twitter this week, it seemed like people were pretty down on him, which is why I was like, oh yeah, I kind of want to talk him up because like there's still stuff there that's like enticing, but if he's gonna be popular, I just go to Ayuk. So this would all be moot, but I would say take the lower rostered piece.
So yeah, I didn't know if your like trick question about all the yardage stuff was like at all an anti-Brandon Ayuk thing.
No, he's fine. I think that range at receiver is not great. I like the 7,000 range a lot, but like, so in the mid 6,000 range, because Ayuk is $6,600. I don't want to use DJ Moore. Don't want to use Marquise Brown. T. Higgins facing a team that doesn't let up a lot of deep volume. I like him and I like his role. I just don't like that spot. DK68, like him more than Ayuk, but like Ayuk over Claypool. Vans at 62. So like Ayuk's kind of like in a weird island spot where like he's fine. I mean, I'm not opposed to him. I would never talk anybody out of him, but I also don't view him as being a priority.
So two quick things. I do have my sheet filtered now to the weeks that you were referencing, and Ayuk has the same target share as George Kittle, which is fun.
Yes.
And you said in passing, T. Higgins faces a team that doesn't allow a lot of downfield work, referring to the Broncos.
Uh-huh.
My data has them 10th in yards per target allowed on downfield passes, but that they're 32nd in passing ADOT faced. So could be phenomenal defense, could be a lot of luck. I'd have to dig into that more.
They're facing Teddy Bridgewater every week, despite having Teddy Bridgewater on their team, basically.
I mean, honestly, I look at like I don't want to go off on a tangent, but there might be something to downfield target regression that maybe it's not really a skill and it's just kind of like a luck-based thing. So,
well, I think it's kind of like a NBA 3-point defense.
Yeah, that's the
preventing deep balls is one thing. Yeah. Being good against them is a different thing. So maybe
with NBA, you're not responsible for how opponents shoot against you.
Correct. But you are responsible for how they what they shoot against you.
How often they get threes. So,
teams aren't taking a lot of threes against the Broncos. They've been fine when they have taken threes, but they haven't taken very many, and that's a matter here.
No. I'm saying they've allowed the highest ADOT.
Oh,
but the
Broncos?
Apparently, according to my data.
Huh.
What are you seeing?
Looks like that's a Vic Fangio team. I mean, I'm basing it off of like the scheme they run. Guess I have done things different this year because they actually have like good personnel, but anywho, they've not let up a lot of big games. I know that. So,
well, like Philly, Buffalo, Tampa Bay, those teams would limit downfield. So yeah, Denver I have is the highest.
Huh. Interesting. Okay. We're going to move to trends because we're not talking about that game. We probably should talk about that game. Anyway, move to trends here and talk about an offense that is interesting because it's confusing right now. And that is the Dallas Cowboys. You're going to go deep. You watched film on this, which is weird. I feel like I should kick you off the show because we're not allowed to watch football. How dare you? I will let you do your trend first and then tender your resignation immediately.
Well, if it helps, I did not actually watch the game last night yet. It's still on DVR, so
Okay. It's actually pretty fun.
yeah, I know I got it spoiled, but it was pickup basketball night and then Christmas cookie decorating night after that. So
Are you gonna send me some?
Hey, maybe
I won't be at my house, so don't send it there.
Okay. Oh yeah, and I guess I'm wearing some Cowboys colors here, so I guess it's fitting. But yeah, I mean, what's up with Dak Prescott is a question that I have. I wanted to find out, and honestly, there are a lot of ways we can go with this. Since he returned in Week 9, he's averaged about 15.5 FanDuel points per game. He's twice surpassed 20, has as many single-digit outputs. It's been very up and down. Before then, his passing net expected points per dropback was 0.35, which was about over three times the NFL average. And the rate at which his receivers dropped the ball was 1.4%. In this sample from Week 9 on, passing net expected points per dropback down to 0.02, league average 0.10. So, not particularly good there. And adjusted for opponent, in this sample, Dak has been worse than expected. I'm not trying to sugarcoat this and say, no, it's all good with Dak. It's just some bad luck. But there might honestly be some bad luck within what we've seen. His passing ADOT is above the NFL average. His expected completion rate is above the NFL average by a little bit. He said 4.2% of his attempts dropped. The NFL average is 3.5%. It's way higher than his early season sample. So maybe there's just maybe he had good luck before the sample with drops and he's having some bad luck and it's kind of regressing to the mean. But he's shown glimpses here towards the Falcons, towards the Raiders, who are on opposite ends of the spectrum in pressure rate. So I don't want to say it's just a pressure thing. My numbers have Dak 1.5 touchdowns short of expectation in the sample. Overall, in the sample, Pro Football Focus's numbers have him about 3.5 shy of expectation in terms of passing touchdowns. And so, frankly, the underlying data is fine. It's not amazing, but it's not as bad as some of the data makes it look. He has thrown 8 touchdowns, which should improve, as I just mentioned, but also 6 interceptions. And so I went back and looked at all those interceptions. Some of them were egregious. Some of them didn't really seem to matter too much. The first one was when they were on their own 35, down 27 points to Denver. Second one was in the end zone to CeeDee Lamb, so that's very costly in an expected points model. The third was at the 5, while basically near the goal line, while on the 20, down 10 with a minute left against Kansas City, so that's costly. Basically a punt on a 3rd and 7 in the fourth quarter, a horrendous overthrow from his own 19, which is very costly to turn it over inside your own 20, and then another horrendous pick from basically the same situation. So there have been bad plays, but anyone who doesn't know should know now that the reason that we love expected points models on this show is they account for all this stuff. An interception is not just an interception. It adjusts for all this stuff. If you turn it over inside your own end zone, if you ruin scoring chances, that hurts your expected points numbers. So if you remove all the picks, which is not fair to do, for every quarterback in this span, he's been league average. So he's just had really costly interceptions that ruin scoring drives, which also can play into the fact of the touchdown numbers being low. So I'm not that concerned about Dak Prescott. His Dak's EPA per dropback without Tyron Smith, according to Next Gen Stats, drops off a lot. 0.13 with him to 0 without him. However, the pressure rate and the sack rate are basically the same exact number, which is astonishing to me. I don't know what that's about, but we have Dak Prescott at 7,500. We have CeeDee Lamb at 74. Amari Cooper at 7,000. Michael Gallup 59. I don't think that this is as bad as the results have been. So I'm kind of in on Dak. The biggest issue is that I don't think he has quite the upside of Josh Allen or Kyler Murray, and I have the salary to get to those guys in most lineups. But I think that Dak Prescott's in the conversation for the QB3, although I probably have Stafford above him, as you kind of made me realize. But top 4 as opposed to just another guy. So any thoughts for you on Dak in this offense right now?
I think he might be 5 for me. I think I might put Rodgers above him. I know you're talking about that later, but I might put Rodgers above him, despite that being a weird, stupid game. So I'm if you gave me Dak with Tyron Smith and Like the calf concerns were still there, but Tyron Smith are playing. I'd probably put Dak 3 or 4 somewhere in there. With the Tyron Smith stuff, I do downgrade him because just this year, their EPA per dropback goes from 0.16 to negative 0.08 with or without Tyron Smith. Completion percentage above expectation, which or over expectation, that doesn't really care too much about picks. So like it accounts for the stuff you were talking about. It's at plus 4.2% with Smith and negative 2.2 without him. So I think it's a pretty decent downgrade. That means I'm lowering Dak. I will still go to the receiver. I think that Lamb is pretty undersalaried. Like we were talking about flex stuff. Every running back in the 7,000 range, unless we get Dylan with no Aaron Jones, I would use Lamb above them.
Yeah. Honestly,
honestly,
the main reason I wanted to look at this was like, can I just play CeeDee Lamb still? Like,
yes.
Or do I need to worry? But
and Gallup. Yeah. Like Gallup's role in week 14, 23% overall share, 40% deep target share. That is similar to what he did in weeks 1 and 11, where they had the first half with all these guys healthy. They've only had 8 quarters with these guys healthy, and Gallup's shares in all those have been good. So I love Gallup. I love Lamb. I'm going to use them a lot. If Pollard weren't to play, I'd go back to Zeke. I would hate myself for it, but I'd do it because like it makes sense. Whatever. But I think that I think the receivers are in play regardless. So I'm probably not going to get to Dak this week, but I will happily use his pass catchers. Yes.
Yeah. If
Amari's a tournament pivot only.
Yeah. If we did not have Kyler and Josh Allen, maybe just had one, I think that I'd have to like really consider Dak more. But this goes, again, it's week 15 now. People who have been listening know that our process is to pick very few quarterbacks and usually high salary quarterbacks. I'm not straying from that. In years past, I think I'd have been like, yeah, I'm going to play some Dak and some everybody. I'm not doing that, but if I was still doing that, I would put Dak in that list.
I'm not sure if you saw me get like ghost face while you were talking, but I was checking Twitter to make sure nothing had happened, and I saw the words Josh Allen and COVID in the same tweet, and I was like, uh-oh.
I saw it too.
But it was Josh Allen. It will be a full participant, and Deion Dawkins on the COVID list, so it's fine. Quick update on the Dolphins. Myles Gaskin and Savon Ahmed were back at practice today. Let's talk quickly about Gaskin here. Just throwing it in. You going to use him or no?
He's like, what, 66?
That's kind of high.
I don't think even like the
it
list.
Is the Jets, but
the list of running backs is getting a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's long enough to get to Gaskin.
I would need for Aaron Jones to play. I would need for Tony Pollard to play. I would need for a lot of stuff to break for me to feel good about him compared to, I need Henderson to play compared to a lot of stuff. I'd probably still put Michelle above Gaskin if Michelle or Henderson were to play, but I don't know. That one's up for discussion. Okay, so let's talk about my first trend here, which is trying to find upside in games with low totals, because it's exclusively low totals this week, which means that slate-wide scoring may be lower, which means the value of identifying even one high upside play is even greater. So I want to dig in here to perfect lineups and see what kinds of players make perfect lineups from games with low totals. The takeaway across all positions is that the players who made perfect lineups in those games had lower salaries and lower total output. So that helps solidify that on a larger slate or typical slate, bigger point totals do come from better games. So that's worth noting. Let's dig in beyond that, though. At quarterback, 16 of 48 quarterbacks from 2019 through this year came from totals of 47 or lower. Those 16 were more heavily favored than those in the higher total games. Spread was minus 4.3 compared to minus 3. And that's a pretty significant gap there. They also had fewer passing yards and slight upticks in rushing yardage and rushing touchdowns. The difference there, minimal, but that is helpful because you score points more quickly via passing touchdowns, via rushing production than you do via passing yardage. These players got a higher percentage of their total points from those compact scoring arenas, we'll say, than others did. So you need either touchdown variance in the passing category or rushing production to break your way through. And using guys with more heavy spreads is fine. And that makes sense anecdotally because that would lead to a higher implied total to keep up with the other guys. At tight end, also looking from 2019 to 2021, because it's only typically one per lineup. 16 out of 50 perfect tight ends had totals of 45 or lower. They were pretty similar to the tight ends in the higher total games. The key difference was the spread. But here, a tighter spread was more valuable. They were favored by 0.3 points versus 2.5 points for the higher total games. So we wanted tighter games at tight end. Same thing showed up at wide receiver. For receiver and running back, I looked at 2020 to 2021 because samples were larger. Totals of 45 or lower, I could zero in more on these because there's more players. The receivers in the lower total games were actually 0.5 point underdogs on average, whereas the higher total guys were favored by 2.2. At running back, 20 out of 76 perfect backs came from low total games. Their spreads were more similar to quarterbacks. They were more heavily favored, which jacked up their implied totals. It was a spread of 3.1 for them versus 0.9 for those in the higher total games. They also got less rushing production, 97.3 rushing yards per game versus 111.1 for guys in higher total games. So the receiving production relatively even, which means that they got a higher percentage of their points via receiving. So to sum it up, because I know it's a lot of numbers and a lot of stuff, it seems as though we should be more accepting of big spreads at quarterback and running back when the total is low, because it jacks up implied totals. It also seems as though we should still chase closer games at wide receiver and tight end. Like, we should still value that. And finally, we want players to be able to score points quickly in high variance fashion. So rushing for quarterbacks, pass catching for running backs. I think those are the key takeaways that I had. So with this in mind, any tweaks you're making to your process for this week to account for the low totals across the board?
Okay, so I was trying to make a list, but I could not get it done. A list of, just of teams with the big spread. We can basically just say that every game this week is a low total. So yeah, the biggest spreads would be Arizona, Dallas, Buffalo, San Francisco, Philly, Miami. Oh my gosh, they're all favored by 9.5 or more. I didn't realize quite how bad it was. So those are the 6 teams who really stand out with big spreads. So are you saying, so that we're on the same page here, that we shouldn't be worried about these teams? We actually want bigger spreads whenever the total is low, just because, in theory, we're getting access to the higher implied team totals?
I'm not saying actively seek out. I'm saying be more accepting of them than we typically are.
Okay. So then that makes me feel really good, because
me too.
that
basically, I wanted to justify using Kyler and Josh Allen despite the big spreads.
Yeah. And I think you should.
Like the data does.
Dallas is on that list.
Yeah.
Tua, makes me feel
like, again, the Waddle stuff hurts.
Makes me feel good about the multiple 49ers. Again, the 49ers have 3 guys in play. So
yeah,
but would this also then just mean we can think of stacks and stacking just the best offenses and avoid the teams on the other sides who, if the spread's big and the total's low, that by nature means that the opponent's implied team total is very low.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's kind of the takeaway here is maybe you just use kind of uncorrelated lineups and you go correlated in the sense I can go Stafford, Sony, Cup, and those 3 all work together.
Yeah.
And then maybe run it back with DK, but then go get exposure to the Cardinals high total on another spot in the lineup, get exposure to the Bills high total in another spot in the lineup, and kind of pepper it in that way.
Yeah, I think, and again, we're talking about being open to maybe 2 pass catchers with a quarterback. Someone like a Kyler plus Ertz and Christian Kirk, because Christian Kirk could really get there with 130 yards or something. If he gets volume, he's good. He gets downfield work, but Zach Ertz needs touchdowns. Maybe that kind of works too.
Receiver tight end are paired together pretty often in perfect lineups. So very, very, and that works for Ayuk, Kittle, Debo, Kittle. Less so because they don't pass as much, but it still works for them too.
Well, I was also thinking with Cup and Sony Michel, Cup can get there on 14 targets and 150 yards.
Yeah.
Because he does that every week.
Yeah. So I think that pairing uncorrelated teammates together, like Sony Cup, Kittle Ayuk or Kittle Samuel, Kirk Ertz, like you said, Kirk Edmonds, if there's no Connor, stuff like that. I think that's also more appealing this week than usual. Again, typically on FanDuel, because touchdown weight matters more. I don't tend to do that very much. I know on other sites it can be very popular and is very profitable. I think on this site in larger field tournaments is less so. So I don't tend to go that direction, but I think this week it's more appealing.
I love it.
Okay, let's go to your second trend then. Talk about that Baltimore Green Bay game because got a tightish spread. It's got some guys we like, but the pace blows. So talk to me about that and what it means.
Yeah. So we've repositioned the show where we talk about the 3 best games in the bookmaker section, and then we have worse games to dig through, and there are worse games than this that I could have combed through for some trends, and I did not want to. So I wanted to look at this game because pace, like you said, not great. I'll put it that way. You put it how you put it, but I'll put it not great.
It's doggy do.
We may not get Lamar Jackson. Sounds like it's a real who could say situation by Sunday. We just don't know. But this game has just red flags, whether he plays or not. But we have 2 kind of higher profile offenses with potentially Lamar. Even without him, we've got Devontae Freeman, Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews, Davante Adams, Aaron Rodgers. Like there are enough relevant plays here that I wanted to dig through. So the Packers, according to the pace numbers I run, are the slowest offense in football. The Ravens are 28th on the full season. It's no surprise then that this game projects to be the slowest of the week by a good margin in my numbers. But it is worth noting that in games with Tyler Huntley playing a majority of the snaps, the Ravens have actually been really up-tempo. They've averaged 27.3 seconds per play. And the way that I measure pace, I think, is different than other. I look just at play. What was the play clock when it was snapped? Doesn't account for how much time you've taken off the clock, anything like that. 27.3 seconds per play with Huntley playing in those 2 games where he played the majority. In all other weeks, they're at 31.8. That's the difference between ranking second on the full season and 30th. So even if their efficiency drops without Lamar, they could run plays faster. They could still run a lot of plays. In those 2 games with Huntley, they've ran 72.5 plays, just passes and rushes. I don't care about like punts and field goals. And the other games are at 70 total. They run, despite a slow pace over the full sample, they run the most plays in football, which is awesome. That slow pace, though, combined makes the other side more worrisome. They have faced the fewest plays per game defensively. That puts me a little bit low on. I know you said Aaron Rodgers was in your consideration set. I think he might not be for me for this reason. As for Green Bay, again, last in pace, 22nd in offensive plays per game while sitting 7th in defensive plays per game. I know it's a joke for us to talk about watching film, but when I do see Green Bay's offense, I feel like they just want to stand around and snap it with 2 seconds left on the play clock. It's just the vibe that I get. That's what they choose to do. That hurts them. That can hurt the opponent. They're 7th in defensive plays. So like there might just be overall play volume concerns. Now, that being said, I did study I actually looked at pace numbers, and this, we always talk about pace. We talk about, seconds per play, but realistically games are 60 minutes long. You got to run plays. The gap between like a low play game and a high play game, that can be big, but a lot of games, they still hit a certain threshold just because you can't just not run plays because you're slow. You got a play clock to deal with. So I'm not worried about like the play volume being too low. It's just not going to be very high, ostensibly based on all this information. So, in a week without stud running backs, I was like, okay, well, I'm much more open to playing Davante Adams, but I'm finding myself way higher on Cooper Kupp and Stephon Diggs than Davante, to the point where I don't think I'll actually get to Davante because I can't play them all. I'm just not going to play hundreds of lineups. Aaron Jones did not practice Thursday, so if he were to miss, I'd still go at A.J. Dillon, no problem, even with these concerns, because his workload would be phenomenal. But as it stands right now, the player I might be highest on in this game is Devontae Freeman at 59, just because of what he gets us access to with quarterback, with tight end, and Cooper Kupp, and Stephon Diggs. I don't want to write off Mark Andrews at tight end. He's actually been phenomenal this season. Doesn't really get talked about enough. Even without Lamar, I still think that this offense is fine in terms of play volume. But I don't think there's enough here for me to say I'm going to play Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams stacks. So any thoughts for you on either side here?
I do think the Packers are still interesting, and I'm growing. I know you were just talking about why I shouldn't be, but I'm growing more fond of Rodgers the more I think about it.
Okay.
Because like they've played slow teams earlier on this year, which means it was slow on both sides. They've played Detroit back on week 2, 26.8 FanDuel points for Rodgers there. They played against Cincinnati in week 4 or 5, 344 through the air for Rodgers there. Only 2 touchdowns. They didn't score a ton, but like, did enough. They faced Chicago twice. Chicago is bottom third of the league in pace, roughly. 23.7 and 29.64. The second game was fluky because Chicago had a bunch of quick touchdowns, and those inflate play volume, or inflate like
Chicago's
possessions.
fast with Justin Fields, though.
Okay, so that helps. I think the first time was without him. I can't recall. No, he was there. Okay, so anyway, I think the point is he can pay off despite the slow pace, and so I'm receptive to him. And on a slate where like I may not need like a 99th percentile outcome to be the highest scoring quarterback, I think he's pretty attractive at 76. So I might push him above Stafford even. I think he's more likely to go above Stafford than below Dak in my quarterback rankings for this week, is what I would say.
So you said Detroit was one of those games?
Yes.
He went for 255 and 4 touchdowns. I don't think
he can do that.
Okay.
So
you're banking on a Russell Wilson game then?
No, because he's had yardage in other ones. Like, I'm not banking on it because he can do it both ways.
Well, speaking of yardage, Cincinnati was the other game you mentioned?
Yeah, 344.
344 in overtime.
Yeah, but like against the Bears, 341. Against the Rams are high pace. They don't count. Minnesota medium pace, 385. Like, I think he's drifting closer to number 3. Slowly. I know to stack him, I go with Davonte. I think MVS works this week too. Not like a priority given that I have Devontae Parker, but MVS is in play still. So
Green Bay is going to stop the pass. They're going to let you run on them. That's what Baltimore wants to do. I think that this could just be a matter of Aaron Rodgers still can pay off, but I think he's got to have that Russell Wilson like 275 and 3 or 4 touchdowns, which is doable.
Yeah,
but I don't love playing Russ for a reason.
Yeah, but Aaron Rodgers is better than Russ right now. So like, it's not really.
But even when I had peak Russ, I didn't love playing Russ.
He's playing like an MVP level right now. He's not going to get it because he's an idiot. But like, I don't know. I think. Do you want to do like a head-to-head bet on Dak versus Rodgers?
Sure.
Okay. So I have Rodgers. You have Dak.
Yeah, but I still think we're probably with Stafford number 3. We're just kind of debating QB4.
I'm getting closer to putting Rodgers at QB3. Getting closer. I'm still going to keep Stafford there, I think, because he's indoors, et cetera, but thinking about it. I do think that there is some appeal in Mark Andrews, a 74, under the assumption everyone goes Kittle as like a bring back here. So like Rodgers, Davonte, Andrews sounds super, super expensive, but I can make that work this week. So I would say that too as being a flag. I think it's Andrews for me and then Davonte in terms
regardless
of
his quarterback.
Probably Huntley's been fine and he hasn't been good. Like his EPA per dropback is negative 0.22, whereas Lamar's at negative 0.01, I believe. His ADOT's a lot lower. Part of that's because Hollywood was out for one of those games, and like they don't have any field stretchers if he's not out there. But I would say Andrews is the preferred bring back over Davonte. But I think that both are in play. So I would not be shocked if I wound up putting Rodgers 3rd. And like I don't think I'll put him above Josh Allen, but there is a non-zero chance I get to Sunday morning and have Aaron Rodgers as my number 2 quarterback. I don't think it's the most likely outcome, but I know myself. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we can anticipate those mistakes too.
I'll say this. I wanted to dig into this game because we had big names with, big ceilings. I'm not saying that all of this points me to avoiding Aaron Rodgers at all costs, but it did not make me feel very excited to play Aaron Rodgers.
I'm not excited, but like I'm not excited about anyone outside of Kyler. So
maybe we'll just play 100% Kyler. What could go wrong there?
Nothing. I agree. Let's move now to my second trend here. Talk about the Titans defense, because a lot of the key high usage studs on this slate are on the Steelers. That's Najee Harris, Deonte Johnson, which is concerning due to their offense, but they're also facing a tough defense. That's the Titans here. The Titans rank 9th in schedule adjusted defense, according to numberFire's metrics. They are 10th against the pass, 12th against the rush, which is noteworthy because this will be just the 5th time this year the Steelers have faced a top 10 defense. And they've had ups and downs in that 4-game sample. They have scored 23, 10, 27, and 10 total points. Ben Roethlisberger is at negative 0.04 passing net expected points per dropback in that span. But against the Broncos, who rank 8th in overall defense, he did light things up, and the team scored 27 points. So basically, they seem volatile, both in the positive and the negative sense. And that volatility is applied to Najee Harris, too. In those 4 games, he has 142 yards twice. In the other 2, he has 49 and 37 yards. Najee's pass catching and his red zone role have both taken a dip recently. And plus, not many backs have blown up against the Titans. James Robinson, the only guy to score more than 20 FanDuel points against them. Robinson, also the only guy with more than 70 rushing yards. Jonathan Taylor had 64 and 70 rushing yards in the 2 games against the Titans. So Najee is going to grade out really well in terms of optimizers. And he's fine, but my preferred guy here is Deante Johnson at 72. Deante, I typically have a hard time getting to him because he typically plays in stupid games. This week, every game is stupid, so who cares? And I'll just take the volume. He has 30% of the overall deep and red zone targets in 3 games since Eric Ebron's injury, since he was put on IR. And that's tough to find, especially at such a acceptable salary of $7,200. Tight spread. We do still want that out of receivers in games with a low total. So I think I'm highest on Johnson among the receivers. Harris is fine, but Johnson is the priority to me. How are you viewing this offense?
I'll play Deonte.
You're not going to play Najee at all?
Again, we're talking. We got to set some boundaries with like what type of lineup count we're talking here.
Yeah.
If I'm playing 10 lineups, no. If I'm playing 50, sure, a few. Mm-hmm. I don't think that there's enough here to feel like I have to play Najee Harris. His ceiling of like his actual ceiling came in his most recent game of 23.9 FanDuel points. Of course, your true ceiling is not just your career.
The highest points you scored to this point.
Yeah. But based on everything we've seen within this offense, against this defense, I don't really think that he's set for 30. And so let's say his ceiling is even a little bit better. Let's call it 25. Can other backs get me 20 while saving 2,000 plus in salary? I think so.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I will use him, but I'm not going to be aggressive in my usage, is what I would say. Where do you sit on Deonte? Because like this is a good range. We've got CeeDee Lamb there. Diggs is a little bit higher. You've got Amari, you've got Metcalf, you've got if you like Higgins, he's there. Ayuk is kind of in that range. So like in the mid range, where does Deonte grade out for you?
That's tough. It's really loaded. I think this might end up being the big question I have lingering into the weekend is which of the receivers I settle on. And, is it I lock in these 2 or 3 running backs, into my lineups like at 80, 90%, because again, just a smaller lineup selection for me so that I can rotate in all these, receivers, or do I try to balance it out more and just cut off certain guys? So can I throw Jamar Chase into this conversation?
If you want to.
So I'd go Chase, Lamb over Deonte.
I go Deonte over Chase by a pretty wide margin, personally.
Why?
Matchup, usage, et cetera. I just don't like using dudes facing the Broncos at all. They're a dumb team. They're a dumb team.
I don't know.
Like, find me an upside game against the Broncos this year. Find me one.
But again, they might be having
One.
extreme luck on downfield passes, or they might be phenomenal at defending downfield passes.
Yeah,
I don't watch that much film.
If you look at their personnel, they're probably pretty good at it. Like,
probably. You know who else is good on downfield passes? Ja'Marr Chase.
I think that for me, it's Deonte or Lamb is kind of the conversation I'd have as being the top guy in that range. That's where I'm at on him.
So you have Lamb, Deonte as like 1A, 1B.
Yeah.
I would say it's probably Lamb 1, Chase, Deonte 2A, 2B.
Okay. It's fair. So you're just higher on Chase than I am, basically, and a little bit lower on Deonte.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not like I have Deonte third, like whoever we were talking about with running back with that conversation.
I also, so like you've been talking about how like I've had some weird process-based things this year where you're like, oh, Jim would never do this. I will have lineups where I pair Deonte with Julio, despite the fact this total is dumb and I hate this game, but I'm going to do it because it's a tight spread. So you can obliterate me on Monday when it doesn't work out, which it won't. So
is it just the tight spread like that gets you there?
Nah, Julio had a 29% target share in the first half last week, played 64% of the snaps, and then they scaled them back in the second half because they were up and he can't block. So I think his role will be better this week.
So 30%, he was targeted on 30% of his routes, which is a really elite number. Like league highs, I think Cooper Kupp right now at 31.9.
Yeah.
So
I prefer Parker, but I'll use some Julio when I have Deonte.
It's just really going to be hard for me to click on Julio over
Van. Tough. Yes,
Christian
I agree.
Kirk.
It is tough. I fully agree with that. Weather for this week, couple spots with some wind that's noteworthy right now. Washington versus Philadelphia. It's currently at 14 miles per hour in New Jersey. I almost said New York. In Jersey for the Giants and Cowboys, 14 miles per hour. One more little tiny baby red flag there for old Dak. Again, doesn't worry for Lamb, but 13 mile per hour winds for Aaron Rodgers and the Ravens in Baltimore. Shush. Put your hands down.
Okay.
Okay. And that's it. So check back on those later on. It's just wind right now, but it's like wind where I think it's at least noteworthy. Check back on Sunday. Let's dive into our positional plays for Sunday slate. Starting off at quarterback, Brandon. What do you got there?
I'm going to go Kyler Murray. 800.
Is he good?
Elite matchup at the Lions. They're 31st in adjusted pass defense based on numberFire's metrics. They're 31st in pressure rate generated according to Next Gen Stats. 31st in average, passing ADOT allowed. 32nd in yards per target allowed on those downfield attempts. Indoors,
I think they have 7 defensive backs either on the COVID list or on IR right now.
Honestly, this is stupid. I'm not even going to name a second quarterback. I'm just going to sit here and say I'm playing Kyler Murray in every lineup.
Love it. I'm going Kyler as my first.
How could it go wrong unless he gets hurt, which but you can't play like that. What are the odds that he just busts again?
You can tell me that. You have that. Have you run your Sims yet or no?
Yeah, that he busts?
Yeah.
I can pull it up. Talk to me about your guys and I'll have it.
So it's Kyler. Kyler's a guy. He's indoors. He's on turf, playing a bad defense. They did lose DeAndre Hopkins, but I can't nitpick Kyler. My second guy, I have Stafford. So the reason I have Stafford here, and I should go Stafford if I think logically, indoors, facing a not great defense, he doesn't get as big of a downgrade to Odell as Russ gets to that Lockett. It's a high enough total for this slate, tight spread. I should go Stafford, faster pace for him. So I'll go Stafford as my second guy, but it's Kyler and Stafford. I am still thinking very hard about Aaron Rodgers, though.
I don't know. For me, it's becoming more and more obvious just to play Kyler. So I have him 85% likely to score at least 15 FanDuel points. So 15% to go under 15 FanDuel points. It's very similar to Josh Allen. About 10% likely to return under 1.5x value. Josh Allen's close to that, but that's just how he's projected. I think if you account for everything, it's just a phenomenal spot for Kyler. And what happens here where he doesn't, aside from, again, leaving the game early?
A lot of rushing touchdowns to the running backs. That's the one scenario I see. That's the only one.
But you're still looking at then yardage
Yeah.
to get there.
Yeah.
Also, if James Conner's out, like,
is Kyler the goal line back?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Could be. So yeah, I think you just go Kyler. Running back, what you doing there?
This is probably one of the harder spots because we have so many uncertainties. But I'm going to say Sony Michel. I feel good with him. 97 and 100% of the snaps the past 2 games. I don't care so much if Henderson's back. I still think he'd be the majority workload back, and I'll take that at the salary within this offense. And the Rams implied team total high, so I'll take that. Second love, James Robinson, 6,300. No Urban Meyer, no Carlos Hyde now for sure. In the game, I know you'll probably have a different sample here, but in games with at least half the snaps, he's averaged 19.9 adjusted opportunities per game, which for us is carries plus double your targets. 54% of the red zone rushes, 34% of the red zone opportunities. The Texans are 28th in rushing net expected points per carry and rushing success rate allowed to running backs this season. And then my third love is Davonte Freeman, 5,900. I don't love this offense regardless of who, I don't love the game, I should say, like the overall game environment, but the salary is really low for someone playing about 68% of the snaps in a run-heavy offense against a team that would rather have you run against them than throw against them. He's been pretty good too. And the Packers are 27th in rushing success rate and rushing net expected points per carry allowed to running backs this year.
Yeah, I think Davonte works. I am okay. Again, I think with Michel as a tournament play if Henderson plays, but a core play if he does not go. My one guy I can tell you right now I'll use is Robinson. There are so many other factors at play with everyone else. I'm going to use my hands. I'm going to use James Robinson on Sunday. If you look at the games without Carlos Hyde, who again has been confirmed out, 85% plus snap rate in both games, 17 plus carries, 2 plus targets, facing Houston, an elite spot for a back. I'm just going to use him. Other guys I would love. I would love AJ Dillon if there is no Aaron Jones. I would love Sony Michel if there is no Darrell Henderson. I would use Ezekiel Elliott a lot if there were no Tony Pollard. I'm not going to love it, but I'll do it. I will probably use Cordero Patterson just because, again, a 48% red zone opportunity share in the past 3 games when he's been used as more of a traditional running back. Still 23.7 adjusted opportunities per game in that span. He's $7,000. I think he works well in those lineups. So right now I can say definitively I will use James Robinson, but I'm keeping very close tabs on Sony, on Zeke, on Davonte Freeman. I'm probably going to use, I guess. I can be realistic about that. But it's thin. I think that I'm hoping that we get some clarity for these backfields.
We haven't mentioned his name, I don't think. Joe Mixon. 8,300 at the Broncos. He might be the one guy who we look back on and say matchup wasn't great, but the workload. I know he was scaled back last week, but he was sick.
Yeah.
He might be the guy who gets 90% of the snaps and like a ton of work, and that we just kind of missed out on. Do you think that you'll get there?
So
I'm more inclined to play Joe Mixon than Najee Harris, I think.
Well, let's say you're giving me a decently high dollar single entry contest. I'm giving a lot of thought to Joe Mixon there.
Okay.
For sure. Absolutely. Because of the reasons you mentioned, where like no one uses him and we don't have great options. So yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. That's a good mention for sure. Let's go to receiver. What you got there?
I'm going to go with Cooper Kupp. I don't think either of us are saying Stephon Diggs, but he is definitely in this conversation. I just think Cooper Kupp's phenomenal. I think I've used that word like 4 times on the show, but it's a long show, so it's spaced out at least. Running backs week, just easy to get the Kupp, easier than usual. He's had double-digit targets in all but one game, at least 9 targets in every game. That's silly. He's gotten 90-plus yards in all but one game, also would qualify as silly. My second love, Brandon Ayuk, 6,600. Has been targeted on 25% of targets on this offense with George Kittle back in action, 28% in those 4 games with Debo playing as a running back mostly, same as George Kittle. Leads the team in that post-Kittle return sample with 1.8 downfield targets per game. 17% red zone target share, I'll take that. Playing against the Falcons, who rank 30th in my adjusted fantasy points per target allowed to receivers number. And then my third love is Christian Kirk at 6,000. I don't need to punt at receiver, so like a Gabriel Davis, not going to make my list. we just don't need that much salary this week for the most part. Going with Cooper Kupp, Christian Kirk, get that CK overlap. I think that there's some value in that inherently. Leads the team in downfield targets after DeAndre Hopkins. And in 7 games against teams who were 20th or worse in yards per target allowed on downfield passes, so the teams who actually give up efficiency downfield. In 7 games, he has at least 13 FanDuel points in 4 of them. 13 is not enough, but you give him some extra volume there. I think that'll work.
I do want to note that apparently Robert Saleh said today that Michael Carter will have a significant role. That doesn't really increase my interest because, I thought he'd have a good role. I was more concerned about the team being trash. So does that change anything for you on Carter or no?
So he's basically going to return to peak Michael Carter.
Yeah.
That's a little bit appealing.
Yeah.
He's 59. That would help me with, so I could see we're not doing a whole lot of game stacks this week. I could see Carter or Carter Gesicki mini stacks. So
yeah, I really don't want to, but I don't know.
Carter or Freeman. It's probably closer than it should be. If he's going to get a significant role.
Freeman's quarterback is playing better right now. If it's Huntley, I like Zach Wilson long term. I liked him coming out, so I'm not writing him off. This is not that. But right now, Tyler Huntley's probably playing better, so I guess I'd go Devontae Freeman.
Boy, right? We're gonna have a lot again. I feel like I'm gonna show up on Sunday morning to build my lineups and not know where to start with running back.
Jim wound up with 70% Aaron Rodgers. How'd that happen? Anyway, my first level receiver is Cooper Kupp. Same reasons you mentioned. Indoor, close game. Potential target bump with no Odell, but does he need it? No. He has a 32% red zone target share. I'm going to have the salary to get there, so I want to. Cooper Kupp, firm priority for this week. My love for number 2 is Deante Johnson. I think lands right there too. But I think that with the massive target load, he's had double-digit targets in all but 2 games this year. That has resulted in just 3 100-yard games because this offense is doggy-doo. But whatever, it's still a good target share. I don't need as much upside this week. I'd still like to get there, but I think Deante can do that. My third love is Devontae Parker. He's just great. Facing the Jets. He was in play before the Jalen Waddle news. In the games he's played with Tua, Parker has a 22% target share and 27% of the deep targets, but Waddle being out vacates 28% of the overall targets, a lot of high leverage looks. He's $5,800. I probably will use Devontae Parker in our head-to-head. I think that's where he's at. I think he's a good tournament play too. But either way, tight end, what do you have there?
George Kittle, elite player. Just an elite play. We have the salary to get there. I have him 43% likely to go for at least 15 FanDuel points with no other tight end at 30%. The gap here is just massive. Atlanta is 28th in adjusted FanDuel points per target allowed to tight ends. He has consecutive games with a 40% target share, like a single game target share.
40
unless
is
my data is wrong, but it seems crazy. But yeah,
I mean he's had 15 and 18 targets, so yeah.
And then I would go with your second love, but I think that this is the clear number 3 for me. Mike Gesicki, 6,200. No games yet without Jalen Waddle, but 18% target share regardless. Waddle's leaving behind a good number of targets, as you mentioned. It's going to make the offense less efficient, which we cover, but bigger work here for Gesicki. Good matchup. I think that he's the clear number 3.
My first one is Kittle. For all the reasons we mentioned, in the games with Debo playing more running back, he's got a 25% target share, 27% in the red zone. They're facing the Falcons. Decent game. I will happily pay for him. The guy you mentioned is Zach Ertz as being the lower salary guy for me. $5,300 against Detroit. In the games with AJ Green but without DeAndre Hopkins, he has a 21% target share, but 20% of the deep targets, Zach Ertz in the year 2021, getting downfield work, 50% red zone share. Great role, great matchup, great quarterback. I think that I could walk out a Sunday slate with just Ertz and Kittle and feel fine, and some consideration having both in the same lineup. Defense, what you got there?
Again, prefer yours, but I like the Eagles still. Coming off a bye, playing who knows, I guess at this point, because I had Taylor Heineke playing like Taylor Heineke, but probably not going to play. So this kind of worked out in my favor. This is the only thing I think that, of course, I'm not excited that anyone has COVID or anything like that. But
Right.
Eagles are 6th in pressure rate, 1st in 8 out allowed. Terry McLaurin, not 100% either. Like, just seems like a really good situation for the Eagles to kind of do some stuff defensively.
Yeah, especially with the way things are trending. I think that they're a very good play. I have Jacksonville. They can actually kind of rush the quarterback a bit. They've got a 26% pressure rate. Texans have an 8% sack rate on offense. And the Texans did throw a bit more than usual last week with Davis Mills. So some more chances for sacks, picks, stuff like that. I do like the Eagles. I like the Steelers, Bengals, 49ers. I will spend up on the Bills this week. I think that they're actually a really good play if I can get there. But options at defense this week. That is all that we have here for today. Brandon, any final thoughts for you before we send the good people off into the wilderness of crazy news and changes?
I think we honestly covered as much as we could at this point. Just you got to stay tuned to the news. That's it.
That is what you got to do. Okay. Make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. UFC podcast already posted via Austin Swaim for Saturday's card. Check that out by searching for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Also, we have Tom Vecchio with NBA and NHL podcasts every weekday. So hit subscribe. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review as well. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I'm at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck with your lineups. We'll talk to you once again on Monday to wrap it all up. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.